So thanks everybody for bearing with us while we had a few little technical issues. Welcome to the second of our webinars. I'm delighted to say that I've got John Price joining us today. I'll just do a very quick introduction because there may be some people who've joined the webinar today who were not on yesterday. So welcome to everybody from Larson-Juhl. My name's Matt George, I'm the sales director. This is my little log cabin down the bottom of my garden where since we've been in lockdown, this is where business has been happening for me. This was an initiative that we wanted to do just to reach out to all of our framing community, bring everybody together and just try and share with you a few ideas from us in terms of helping you with your framing business as we're going through this really difficult time, and to just start a few sessions and ideas to help you to think about when business gets back to normal a little bit. So I'm just going to share my screen and then I'll run through with you some of the things that we're going to cover off today, and then I'll hand over to John. Okay, so welcome to the second of our Larson-Juhl webinar sessions. First of all, just for those of you who are new to Zoom, just a few guides on how to ask questions. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a few symbols. You've got a Q&A symbol where you can ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the session, or we may take a few as we're going through the session. We've also disabled the chat facility, so you won't be able to do the chat facility on there. You can raise your hand, but you won't be able to chat when you do that. So if you've got any questions, then fire them through on the Q&A, and we'll answer them as we go through. For those of you that weren't on yesterday, this is just a reminder of the different sessions that we've got planned for you this week. So yesterday we had the first session, which was with Manny Wallier from our Larson-Juhl US team. Manny talked all about digital. I've got a recording of that I'll be putting onto the website for those of you that missed it, and you can also see the presentation slides from that as well, and all of the webinars that we've got coming up. Secondly, today I'll hand over shortly to John Price from Handmade Picture Framing and Gallery. John's going to talk to you about Framing Masterclass. He's done a number of videos for us at Larson-Juhl before, and John will take you through some tips and techniques to help you with your framing. Then on to tomorrow, Joe Palmer is going to be joining me from the framing lot, and myself and Joe will talk to you about some sales and marketing ideas, and also talk to you about your shop and your showroom and how you go about trying to maximize what you're doing from sales, and with a focus again on once we get through COVID-19, what we're going to do once we get back to a bit of normality. So that's Friday's session. I'm delighted to have Joe Palmer joining me for that one. Then on Monday afternoon, Graham Perryman from Dragonfly Framing will come along and talk a little bit about creating your unique selling proposition. So Graham will talk to you about how you think about doing things differently for you as a business, how you set yourself apart from other people, and how you try and get people engaged and interested in your business. So a very interesting session coming up next week from Graham. And then to round the week of webinars off, we've got a guest speaker from our accountancy company, MHA Accountancy. They're going to talk to you all things about business continuity. So they'll share with you the latest from the government in terms of job retention scheme, grants, loans, and any financial information that you may find will help you as we're going through COVID, and also as we're getting out the other side of that and starting to prepare for lockdown. So we'll have the guys from MHA come along on Tuesday and round off the week of webinars talking about that. As I mentioned before, we're recording all of the webinars, those videos, all the presentation slides. We'll upload those all to our Larson-Juhl website, and we will send you out details of how to access them from the website. We'll also be sending a survey at the end of the week to just get your feedback on the sessions. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's session. I've had some good communication from a number of you, so it sounds like you've got some good ideas from that already. But we'd like your feedback once we get through the week of sessions, so keep an eye out for that. As I said yesterday, please share on social media, encourage as many as your colleagues and the framing community to join these sessions, and enjoy what we've got coming up for you today. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to hand over to John. So do you want to just do a microphone test, John, just see if we're working?
Yeah, hello, Matt. Hopefully now you can see me and you can hear me.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'll hand over to you.
Right, hello there, everybody. So firstly, thank you, Matt. As Matt's already said, my name is John Price. I own and run a framing business in Bude in North Cornwall called Handmade Framing and Gallery. And as Matt's already explained, I've written a number of articles as one of Larson-Juhl's framing experts for Four Walls magazine, and produced a number of videos alongside Larson-Juhl, which you can find on their website. What I want to talk to you about today is mounting artwork on paper, but I want to talk to you about mounting artwork on paper properly. The reason that I want to talk about mounting artwork on paper is because the vast majority of artwork that comes into my workshop, which has already been framed or has been pre-mounted, has been framed or mounted in a way in which has either caused it damage or will cause it damage in the long term. So to me, this is a very important thing that we should be putting across to framers and saying to framers, whether you are an artist that frames your own work, whether you're an amateur framer, a part-time framer, or indeed a professional framer, that we all need to know how to mount artwork on paper in a way that won't cause it long-term damage. So that's why it's a little bit of a bugbear for me. And what I'm going to do now is just share my screen with you. So bear with me. Okay, great. So hopefully now everybody can see that. Okay, so the first thing that we need to understand when we're mounting artwork on paper is that if we use incorrect techniques for mounting artwork on paper, we can cause that paper to wrinkle and distort, or cockle and buckle. We need to understand that poor framing materials can cause acid and adhesive damage, but that if we mount artwork on paper correctly, we can help to conserve it for many years, even decades, and we can help it to keep looking good for years. And I think as framers, there's a couple of things to consider there. Firstly, surely our job as framers is to look after the artwork that we're framing, and so we should be conserving it and mounting it in a way that conserves it for years. And the next thing is, if the artwork that we framed continues to look good for years, well, that's got to be a pretty good advert for our business. So there's a couple of good reasons there, first of all, to be doing the job properly. So let's talk a little bit about what we shouldn't be doing. And we need to understand that paper itself is hygroscopic. In other words, it fluctuates according to the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. It expands and contracts with that relative humidity. And what that means is that as we mount our artwork on paper, we need to mount it in a way where it can expand and contract, because if we restrict that, then it will cause that artwork to cockle and buckle, to wrinkle and distort. So what we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be taping the artwork along the top edge, because that stops that expansion from left to right and causes rippling along the top edge, okay, known as cockling. And we shouldn't be taping the artwork all the way around, like the picture that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen now, because what that does is it stops our artwork expanding and contracting altogether. Okay, and it's the same if we tape it at all four corners as well. So what about the materials? What materials should we be using? Well, we need to understand that a lot of the time, the mount board that's marketed to us as framers as acid-free or pH neutral can actually damage our artwork. And the reason for that is a lot of the budget boards that are mounted as acid-free and pH neutral, and even the most budget boards they are acid-free and pH neutral at the time. Sorry, let me correct myself. Acid-free is a very misleading term. Let's not use that. They are pH neutral at the time of manufacture. And that's because they're treated to be pH neutral at the time of manufacture. And actually what happens is they contain lignin, which comes from wood sap. And as that lignin breaks down, that board starts to become acidic. So over a period of time, the board becomes acidic and it starts to then damage the artwork that we frame with it. Okay. So if you look at the picture on the top right hand of your screen now, you'll see that the image has got a brown line around it. And that's where an acidic mount board has been used on that image and has come into contact with the paper and has caused acid burn. The next thing we need to think about is that we shouldn't be using self-adhesive tapes. And there's a couple of reasons that we shouldn't be using self-adhesive tapes. Firstly, because self-adhesive tapes will eventually fail. Okay, the adhesive on them will just dry out and they'll no longer be holding our artwork in place. Okay, that's particularly if they're subject to any heat. The second reason we shouldn't be using self-adhesive tapes is because they can leave behind a sticky residue, which stains and damages our artwork. So if you look at the picture now at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side, you can see where I've removed some masking tape from around the edge of a piece of artwork, and you can see the residue that's been left behind by that. So what that means in both the cases of these two pieces of artwork that we've got photographed here is that artwork, if we wanted to remedy that problem, that artwork would then have to be sent to a conservator, and it would cost our client a lot of money to rectify those problems. And as framers, we shouldn't be creating problems like that in the short term or in the long term. So what materials should we be using? Well, it depends on the value of the artwork we're framing. And a really good way to get this information on what materials we should be using is to refer to the Fine Art Trade Guild's 5 levels of framing. Okay, that's available from their website, which is fineart.co.uk. And I'm sure if you're listening in now from the United States, then the Professional Picture Framers Association can provide you with documentation with exactly the same kind of information. But artwork of any value should be framed with what we call conservation materials. And the great thing is that when you deal with a reputable manufacturer or supplier like Larson-Juhl, then they give you that kind of guidance in their sundries catalogues, and they'll tell you that this mount board is suitable for conservation work or standard framing work or museum work, and it's the same with tapes, etc. as well. So, in order to mount our artwork on paper properly, we need to do something called constructing a mount package. And when I put it like that, it sounds like I'm asking you to undertake a big task, like building an extension onto the side of your house or something. But actually, constructing a mount package is very simple. We need 3 things. We need a window mount, an undermount, which is of the same size as our window mount, but doesn't have any aperture. And we need the right kind of tape to join the 2 together. And I tend to use a conservation gum white paper tape. You could also use a linen tape as well. And I can hear some of you now sitting there potentially saying, okay, well, this guy, John Price, is telling me that I should no longer be attaching artwork to the back of a window mount using self-adhesive tape. I should be constructing a mount package. How much more is that going to cost me? And I think that's a really good and really relevant question. So what I've done is I've done a comparison. How much more will it cost for you to construct a conservation mount package compared to a budget window mount where the artwork's been attached with self-adhesive tape? Okay, and what I've done is I've based that on an A4 size mount. So a conservation mount board costs around £2.60 more a sheet than budget mount board. And what I've done there is I have compared a good quality conservation board from Larson-Juhl to the absolute cheapest budget mount board I could find. Okay, you'll see I've also put prices there for anybody that's working in US dollars. Our conservation undermount costs £2.83 a sheet, and I realise these prices will vary slightly, or $3.50 a sheet if you're in the States. And our conservation gum white paper tape, well, the difference in price between that and masking tape is so little that it's almost not worth considering, but it works out at about 5p more per metre than masking tape. So looking at our A4 size mount then, what does this mean? How much more is it going to cost you in terms of materials to do the job properly, to help to conserve artwork on paper, and to help provide a better quality product and service for your client? Well, the answer is an astounding 47p, or 59 cents if you're in the US. And hopefully you'll agree with me that that's a very small price to pay in order to mount the artwork and do the job properly. And I don't know all of the people that are listening in here. I don't know your framing business. And I fully appreciate that if you are making the cheapest frames possible and you're trying to compete with IKEA or Walmart or whoever it is that produces the cheapest frames out there, then maybe 47p is a big part of your markup, your profit on a particular frame. But realistically, for those of us that are bespoke framers and we're trying to provide a better quality product and service for our customers, I think 47p is such a minimal amount that we shouldn't even be considering that additional cost. So back to the practicalities now. Now I've gone off on that little tangent. Okay, so we said we need to construct a mount package, and that consists of a window mount and an undermount. As we know as framers, the job of the window mount is to enhance our artwork. But let's not forget one of the other really important jobs of the window mount. It's to space the artwork away from the glazing. Unless we are framing something of very, very low quality, almost something that's disposable, extremely easy to replace, then our artwork shouldn't be coming into contact with the glazing at all. Okay, so our mount board, our window mount is doing a very important job there. Certainly at conservation level, or as a general rule of thumb, I would say our window mount should not be less thick than 1100 microns. And a window mount aperture, of course, should overlap our artwork by 5mm. The undermount, its job is to support the artwork properly. So if you imagine now a piece of paper-based artwork attached to the back of a window mount, then the only support that window mount is giving the artwork is around the edges where it's having that minimal contact. If we've got an undermount there, it's a solid sheet of board, okay, so it's fully supporting our artwork. And the other thing that our undermount does is it protects our artwork from impurities in the backboard. So we talked a little bit earlier on about mount board that is promoted as acid-free or pH neutral but becomes acidic. Well, it's the same with a lot of backboards as well. So we need that barrier in between the two. The other great thing, going back to conservation mount board, is actually, if you saw the price on it, it's less expensive than a lot of mount board anyway. So it's a really good option to use the conservation mount board as standard. Conservation undermount as standard. And the undermount should be the same size and the same quality as our window mount, so 1100 microns. When we construct our mount package, what we do is we join together the window mount and the undermount along their longest sides. Okay, I'd refer to the picture on the right hand side here as well, and we join them together with tape. Okay, So a portrait mount package will be joined when it's closed along the left-hand side, and a landscape mount package will be joined along the top. To do that, we lay our window mount face down on our clean workbench, and we put the undermount next to it with the two longest edges butted up together. We cut our tape to the same length as that join, and then we dampen our tape, and we dampen it with deionized water. And the reason we're using deionized water is just because it's less likely to cause any staining. Okay. So all I would do here is just take my bottle of deionized water, empty a little bit into a small container, dip in a clean brush, get rid of any excess water on the brush, and then just run it along the glossy side of the tape, which is, if you're not used to this type of tape, it's kind of like an envelope where you've got the gum side is glossy. And then you would just place that tape along the two edges. Okay, so half of your tape's on the window mount, half's on the undermount. It's also worth saying at this point that if you're using the linen tape, then you need to then burnish that tape just to get rid of any excess moisture, and it just helps the tape to adhere properly. It's actually one of the reasons I prefer to use the gummed paper tape, because it's just a little bit quicker and a little bit easier, and I find it adheres better. So once you've done that, you allow your tape to dry, and then hopefully you end up with something like the picture here on the right-hand side, your window mount, your undermount joined together and taped down that join. The next thing we do is we close our mount package. And actually, just before we do that, it's always worth taking a framer's bone and just running it along that join between the window mount and the undermount. So we fold the two together, so we form a sandwich, and then just spend a little bit of time aligning the window mount and the undermount. And again, what we're trying to do is ensure that as we open and close that package, it opens and closes consistently in the same place. Okay. So now we've constructed our mount package. What we want to do is attach our artwork to it. Okay. We always attach our artwork to the undermount rather than the window mount, and that's so the artwork is properly supported. And the most common way to attach artwork on paper is with what's called a T-hinge. Okay. And you can see if you look at the picture on the right-hand side exactly why it's called a T-hinge. So normally we'd use two T-hinges. Sometimes on bigger, heavier pieces of paper, we would use more than two T-hinges. And each T-hinge consists of two pieces of paper, two pieces of tape, excuse me. So again, to look at what kind of tape we need to be using, I'd refer to the Fine Art Trade Guild's 5 levels of framing, because it's different for different levels of framing. As a rule, what I would do is use the gummed white conservation paper tape, and I use that for everything with the exception of museum standard work. Okay, so that's my standard tape that I use. I've got two pieces of tape. One piece forms the upright of our capital T, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, and the other piece forms the cross piece. The upright's a little bit longer than it is wide, because some of that upright, of course, needs to go onto the back of the artwork. And the cross piece is about 3 times longer than the width of the upright. And the reason for that is because it's going to hold our upright to the undermount. So to start attaching our T-hinges to our artwork, what we do is we dampen the end 5 millimeters of the glossy side of the upright, and we're going to attach that to the back of our artwork. So we've turned our artwork over. Okay, we attach it again with deionized water. Remember, I talked about using deionized water because the deionized water won't potentially stain our artwork. And when we attach the upright to the back of our artwork, we attach it, as I've said, to the underside, to the backside of the top of the artwork, and we attach it about 1/4 of the way in from the edge of the artwork, And as standard, we'd normally overlap the artwork by about 5 millimeters. Again, sometimes on bigger, heavier pieces of paper, we might increase that amount. But as a rule of thumb, we're going onto the back of the artwork only by 5 millimeters. And what's important to emphasize here is that with our hinges, they should be the weakest part of the whole package. So in other words, the hinge is weaker than the artwork, and that's reflected on the type of tape we use. Once we've put one hinge onto the back of our artwork, a quarter of the way in, then we repeat, of course, on the other side. We allow those uprights to dry, and this tape, the gum wet paper tape, takes literally a couple of minutes to dry. And we then take our artwork and we open up our mount package again, and we place our artwork face up in between the window mount and the undermount. Okay, and we spend a little bit of time then just adjusting the artwork so it's going to sit in exactly the place we want it to appear under the window mount when the whole thing's constructed. And if you look again at the picture on the right hand side, you can see now I've placed my artwork in between two. You can see the upright tabs appearing from behind the back of the artwork where I've attached them. And what I've done, once I've got my artwork into position, before I've opened up my window mount again, is I've just put a paperweight on it to hold it into position. Okay, and again, of course, we might use more than one paperweight on a bigger piece of artwork. It's also worth saying here that if I were framing something on paper which had migratory pigments, so something like a pastel, then of course I wouldn't place my paperweight on top of the artwork. I would just, excuse me, I would just be very careful about opening and closing my window mount once I position my artwork, and while I attach the artwork to the undermount, so that I'm not moving it at all, because of course if I were to place a paperweight on top, it may potentially mark or damage the artwork if it's a pastel or something with migratory pigments. So now I've got my artwork in position, and I'm going to attach my upright T-hinges into place. So what I do is I dampen one of my cross pieces using my deionized water, and I place it over the part of the upright hinge that's protruding from the back of the artwork. When I do that, I leave a little bit of a gap between the bottom of that cross piece and the top of the artwork, and that's an expansion gap. And it also makes sure that the cross piece doesn't come into contact with the front of the artwork at all, okay? Because none of our T-hinge comes into contact with the front of the artwork. Once I've done one, I repeat on the other side. And then hopefully what I end up with is something that looks like this. So you can see the artwork at the bottom of the screen. You can see clearly the two uprights of the T-hinges that are placed a quarter of the way in from either side. You can see that they protrude onto the back of the artwork, and as I said, that's normally by 5 millimeters. If you look at the cross piece of the T-hinge, you can see the gap between the top of the artwork and the bottom of the cross piece of the T-hinge. And so again, we just give that a minute or two to make sure it's dried and to adhere. And then we can close up our mount package again, remove a paperweight, and hopefully what we end up with is a beautifully mounted piece of artwork like this. So I appreciate now that for some of you, there would have been a lot of new information there. So let's just recap on that for a minute. So we've said that taping along the top edge of the artwork, along all four edges, or indeed at all four corners, can cause that artwork to distort or cockle and buckle. We've said that budget mount board, which is often marketed as acid-free or pH neutral, and self-adhesive tapes can cause long-term damage to artwork. So we need to ensure that we're using the correct materials and techniques. And one of the best ways to make sure we're using the correct materials is to refer to the Fine Art Trade Guild's 5 levels of framing. Yes, it costs a little more to do the job properly, but it's a very small amount to ensure that you are looking after artwork and providing a good quality service and product to your customers. The artwork should always be attached to the undermount and not the window mount. The window mounts and the undermounts should be of the same quality, so 1100 microns, okay, as a minimum, and they should both be of the same size. We join the window mount and the undermount along their longest sides. So as I said, if it's a portrait mount package we're creating, the join is along the left-hand side normally, and if it's a landscape, the join's along the top. We join with gum white paper tape or linen tape dampened with deionized water. And with our T-hinges, they're placed 1/4 of the way in from either side. They're attached to the back of the artwork by 5 millimeters normally, and they have no contact at all with the front of the artwork. We leave a few millimeters gap between the bottom of the artwork, sorry, the top of the artwork even, and the bottom of the cross piece of the T-hinge. So for further information on these techniques, there's a couple of places that I'd recommend you look at, and both of these are step-by-step guides. There's the Larson-Juhl UK website, so larsonjuhl.co.uk. If you click on Haven and then videos, you'll find the John Price Masterclass videos. There's 6 at the moment. I'm pleased to say there's a few more that are going to be on there soon. And the first one of those on the list is creating a mount package. Okay, it's about 1.5 minute long video, so it's very easy to digest, and it's just a step-by-step guide. If you go to my website, which is handmadepictureframing.co.uk, there's a section called How To, and if you click on that, you'll see an article called How to Mount Your Art and Photography, and again a step-by-step guide with written explanation and photographs. So I guess it's a good time to hand back over to Matt and find out what questions you've been asking through the presentation, and try and avoid answering any of the complicated ones. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, John. That's very useful. So some really great ideas and tips there for everybody to use. So we have got a few questions coming in, a couple of them technical. So let's see if you can do your best on a few of these. So Keith has asked one here. Keith's just saying, why wouldn't you adhere the upright part of the T-hinge, the lower part, to the undermount?
Well, because if I understand the question correctly, because the gummed white paper tape, firstly, it's only gummed on one side. So if you think about the way that you construct it, the gum can only be attached to the undermount, sorry, to the back of the artwork. And also, if you think about it, if you want to remove that artwork at any point, then because the back of the upright is attached just to the artwork, and you imagine that you've got the gap between the two, then what you can do is you can just slice the upright in that gap. Then you can take out your artwork, turn it over, and because the T-hinge is just attached slightly to the back of the artwork, you can just wet the T-hinge with deionized water, leave it for a few minutes, and then peel it off. So it's a completely reversible process because of the way that the T-hinge is attached. I hope I've answered the question there.
Okay, thanks, John. Got one here as well from Martin, just saying, please can I be clear on what you mean by self-adhesive tape? Is this just masking tape, or would you include pH 7 to 70 self-adhesive tape as being something to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, basically, when we're attaching artwork, I would always use, as I say, a conservation gummed white paper tape. The problem with self-adhesive tapes, is that basically that adhesive is going to fail at some point. Okay, it's going to dry out, it's going to fail, and I can think of no circumstance where I would use a self-adhesive tape for those reasons. So yeah, I'm including all self-adhesive tapes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And Peter's just asked about conservation mount board, which
Yep.
he normally uses as an undermount.
Yes.
A lot of people do. Is there a conservation undermount which is cheaper, or do you normally just use the conservation mount board as your undermount?
Okay. So yeah, of course you can use the conservation mount board, but yes, there is a conservation undermount. I'm trying to think exactly what it's called in the Larson-Juhl sundries catalogue, but the conservation undermount is actually considerably cheaper. It's as I say, I think it was $2.83 a sheet. You have to buy 25 sheets at a time, but that's what I always use as standard. It's 1100 microns. So it's the sort of quality that we should be using. And yeah, it's a cheaper option. It's designed just for exactly the purpose of being an undermount. So sorry, Matt, I've reduced your sales of mount board now for a cheaper product.
We want the best for our framers out there, John. So listen, anything to try and help everybody is the best way to go. So no problem at all. Okay, I've got a few more coming here. What is my French pronunciation probably isn't very good, but passe-partout, is this some kind of tape?
Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Okay, we'll get back to you on that because I don't know as well. So we'll
Yeah,
do that and then we'll get back.
that's one of the things I love about being a Larson-Juhl framing expert. You know, I don't know the answer to everything, and you know, this is also why I'm logging into all of these webinars myself, because you know, I think as a framer, even the most experienced framers I know would tell me that they're always learning.
Absolutely. So let's just see, we've got a couple more here. I mounted some photography exactly as you described, and after 72 hours the photographic paper could be seen to ripple on the T fixing points. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always very hard with specific examples without seeing something. Ripple on the fixing points. Yeah, I would again, I'd probably have to see that to see what the situation is. There's lots of scenarios I could think of. I could think that potentially, you know, maybe the tape was too wet. Did that cause the problem? But no, I'd have to see it specifically.
Okay, no problem. I think that was from Mark. So Mark, if you want to, you could either email it over to myself or you could speak to John directly. You know, we're happy if you want to send us an example of what happened to try and help you out on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to get back to you on that.
No problem. I've got Joss who said, if you have heavy Archer's paper, £400 paper, which has already buckled slightly as a consequence of the painting, do the same hanging principles still apply?
Well, the problem with paper is once it has distorted, in theory, it's very, very hard to make it to sit flat again. There are a couple of different techniques that I've used to try and help paper to sit flatter in a mount. So you can add a couple of extra, but it depends on the size of the piece. But you could potentially add a couple of extra T-hinges further in, so that you've got the two that are a quarter of the way in. You could add another couple further in as well. The other thing, and it's a technique, to be honest, that I was taught fairly recently, was you can take the cutout from your window mount and then you can adhere that to the back of the undermount. So on the back side of the undermount, and when that goes into the framing package, that can also help to just support the artwork a little bit better and help the whole thing sit a little bit flatter.
Okay, thank you very much. Got one from Lorraine. Is there any reason why you would join the window mount and undermount on the side rather than along the top?
Yeah, so you're joining them along the longest side. each and every time. So you would join along the top if you were making a landscape mount package, or you would join along, it's normally the left-hand side. You would join along the left-hand side on a portrait. So yes, sometimes you do join along the top, always the longest side, so you've got the strongest construction there.
Cool. Okay, thanks. And does wetted tape work as well on photos? That's from Keith.
Sorry, I didn't hear all of that question, Matt. You broke up there slightly.
Does wetted tape work as well on photos?
Yeah, you can have issues with some photos. Again, I think it would depend on the photographic paper. Normally, to be perfectly honest, it would depend on the photographic paper, and I would try it and I would see what the results were.
Okay, and what is the purpose of barrier paper if not to separate the work from the backing?
Okay, so the purpose of barrier board, if we're talking about the same thing, or barrier paper, is yes, it's to separate the artwork from the backing. I would use an undermount. A lot of the barrier paper is very thin. Sometimes at a higher level of framing, or indeed if you've used certain ways of connecting fixings to, say you've put them in the backboard rather than on the frame itself. So if you've got a very narrow frame, then you would put in an extra layer of protection between the undermount and the artwork.
Cool, great, thank you. And David's asked, can you elaborate on deionized water, please? What is it and how do you use tap water?
Okay, so as the name would suggest, what's happened is the iron from the deionized water has been removed. It's extremely inexpensive. You can pick it up from any DIY store, normally either in litre bottles or 5 litre bottles. I bought a 5 litre bottle about 2 years ago. I'm still going on it, and I think it costs £3 or £4 for the 5 litre bottle. So the whole idea is because the iron's been removed, it's less likely for that water to then stain the artwork.
Cool, makes sense. And Nicola's asked, you mentioned that you don't use the gummed tape for museum grade frames. What do you use instead? We currently make T-hinges using Japanese paper and methyl cellulose paste, which is quite time consuming to mix up. Are the gummed tapes a good alternative?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the T-hinge should always be the weakest point of the mount package. So it depends on exactly what you're framing, the weight of the paper, etc. Larson-Juhl do a gummed white rag tape, ragged gum tape, which I use a lot of the time. But then also depending on the weight of the paper, etc., I'll also make up T-hinges from Japanese paper. But that gum white rag tape is definitely worth looking at, which is a quicker alternative method.
Okay, thanks. Ed said that we frame a lot of deeds on vellum. Can you recommend any tapes for holding these in place?
Deeds on vellum. Let me think what we would do with deeds on vellum. Yeah, I mean, again, I would need to look at it and see what was the most suitable thing at the time. But I can't see any reason why you couldn't use a gum white paper tape for vellum off the top of my head.
Okay, and got one here. Unfortunately, I lost connection during the webinar. Do you routinely close the mount to access the artwork before completing your T-hinges? Do you routinely close the mount to assess that the artwork is straight, before completing your T-hinge?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about these presentations, I know they're being recorded, so you can go back and watch it again anyway. But yes, once you have put the uprights onto the back of the artwork, of the uprights of your T-hinges, then the artwork goes into the mount package and you adjust it, put it into position, weigh it down normally, or hold it in position with a paperweight, open the whole thing up and then attach the cross pieces of your T-hinge, so yes.
Okay. Thank you. And then Andrew and Linda have asked, what is the difference between 5mm of tape adhering to the back of the artwork from the T-hinge as opposed to a simple piece of tape hinged onto the reverse of the window mount?
What is the difference? Well, if we go back to the start of the presentation, what I was saying is that if you've got, sorry, repeat the question once again. Let me hear that again, Matt.
Hold up 1 second.
Sorry.
What is the difference between 5mm of tape adhering to the back of the artwork from the T-hinge as opposed to a simple piece of tape hinged onto the reverse of the window mount?
Okay. Well, if I think what you're saying is instead of using 5mm of tape onto the back of the artwork compared to the same width of tape and 5mm going onto the artwork from the window mount, the main difference is the undermount. If you attach your paper-based artwork to the back of the window mount, then there's no support there. Your paper-based artwork is only being supported during the framing process. Particularly, it's only being supported by the edge of the window mount. Whereas if you've got a whole mount board there, a whole undermount there, it's supporting the whole back of the artwork because there's no aperture in it. Okay, so that's why you're attaching your artwork to the undermount, because you've got this whole solid sheet there that's then protecting and supporting your artwork whilst you're moving it around, framing it, and then of course that undermount is then there to protect the artwork from the backboard as well.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Got a couple more. So Mark's asked, with the power of gravity over time, he's always felt that the Guild's advice to use the side for fixing is dodgy unless the piece is extremely portrait, i.e.
Yeah.
I tend to fix on the top in most cases to avoid any long-term slimping of the side fixing. Do you have any on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that basically both the undermount and the window mount are in the frame anyway, and so the frame is also helping to support that. It's not like your window mount can potentially drop by any distance, because both of those pieces will be sitting in the rebate of the frame and supported at the bottom anyway. So that would be my answer to that particular.
Cool. Okay, and then Lynette's asked, what about mounting photographs with self-adhesive pH neutral tape? I find dampness from the tape can make the photo wrinkle. Yeah,
I mean, funnily enough, that's similar to the question earlier on, isn't it? I guess it would depend on the thickness of your paper. Again, the problem with using a self-adhesive tape is that eventually that self-adhesive tape is going to fail. I think if you were having issues with using a gummed tape that you had to wet with your photographs, then I think I would be looking possibly at different techniques for attaching the photograph into the frame. So, for example, you could look at it's a little hard to explain this without examples in front of me, but you could be looking at potentially corner pockets on all four sides of your photograph. You could be looking at techniques where you're supporting the photograph in a different way onto the mount package that's then hidden behind, onto the undermount that's then hidden behind the window mount.
Great. Okay, thank you. And also a big thank you to Joe Palmer, also Pauline and Derek in my team as well, because whilst we've been speaking, you've been helping us out on passe-partout, which is actually the French word for mount board. So it's the old way of taping the glass and mount package with no frame. And then Pauline's and Derek have also just been helping out with the conservation backing boards. So the board needed is the white core conservation backing board. There's 4 thicknesses of that. And the 1100 micron one is LLL 008950. I think Peter as well, thank you, because you'd spotted that as well and sent it across to me. That's all the questions. I saved one for last to let you kind of finish though, John, because I had one come through here which I thought was good, and this was someone who just said that they enjoyed it, and in a couple of sentences, how would you phrase the mission statement of your job?
Oh God, how would I phrase the mission statement of my job? I don't know. I don't really consider that I have a job. I consider myself extremely lucky to be a Larson-Juhl framing expert. You had a message there from Joe Palmer, who's current master of the Fine Art Trade Guild. Joe's somebody that I turn to when I, like all framers, I have that situation where I think, well, I'm not really sure what I should be doing here. This is something new to me. And that's one of the things I love about framing. Isn't it amazing that you always get new challenges? If every day was the same and it was boring, it would be extremely boring. So I turn to people like Jo, you know, who's extremely knowledgeable, and ask her advice. So how would I describe my job? I don't know. I mean, all I can say is that particularly with mounting artwork on paper, it would just be really nice to see more artwork on paper coming into to me that's been pre-mounted, that's been framed already, being framed in a way that isn't going to cause it long-term damage. And I feel very lucky that people like Jo have imparted and shared their advice with me. A lot of other members of the Fine Art Trade Guild team, the more experienced framers, and if I can pass some of that knowledge on to other people, then I'm very lucky.
Cool, good stuff. Okay, listen, thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate the time that you've given to us today, and thanks to everybody who's joined us on the webinar. As I said before, I have recorded them, so we'll get them put up on the on our website so that you can access them afterwards, along with the presentation that John went through as well. And look forward to another session tomorrow afternoon with myself and Jo. So
yeah, I'll be looking forward to that one too.
Good stuff. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.